Have you ever met someone whose single act of kindness changed an entire life? Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that compassion can change the world. Today's story is about a cold winter night, a grieving widow, and a man who refused to let fear of gossip stop him from doing what was right. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why one sentence spoken beside a fire became a lesson an entire town would never forget. "I've got room by the fire," he told the freezing widow. "And I don't care who talks." The words echoed through the bitter wind like a promise. Snow fell heavily over the small town of Millfield, covering roads, rooftops, and fields in a blanket of white. Most people had locked their doors hours ago. Smoke curled from chimneys, and families gathered around warm tables, grateful to be indoors. But not everyone had a warm home waiting. At the edge of town, Sarah Whitmore pulled her worn coat tighter around her trembling body. The wind pierced through the fabric as though it weren't there at all. She had been walking for hours. Her cheeks were red from the cold, and her boots were soaked through from the snow. Every step felt heavier than the last. Only 6 months earlier, Sarah's life had looked completely different. She had been married to Thomas Whitmore, a hard-working carpenter known throughout Millfield for his honesty and kindness. Together they lived in a modest cottage filled with otter and dreams. Then tragedy struck. One rainy afternoon, Thomas had fallen from a damaged scaffold while repairing a church roof. The accident took his life before help could arrive. Sarah's world shattered. The grief alone would have been enough. But grief was only the beginning. Without Thomas's income, debts quickly mounted. Medical bills from previous treatments, mortgage payments, and everyday expenses swallowed what little savings they had. At first, neighbors offered sympathy. They brought meals. They spoke gentle words. They promised support. But promises fade faster than winter daylight. As weeks passed, people returned to their own lives. The meals stopped coming. The visits became rare. The concern disappeared. When Sarah couldn't keep up with payments, the bank reclaimed her home. Everything she and Thomas had built together vanished. Now she owned little more than the clothes she wore and a small suitcase containing photographs, letters, and memories. That night, as snowstorm warnings spread across the county, Sarah searched desperately for shelter. She knocked on doors. Some people pretended not to hear. Others offered excuses. A few simply shook their heads. The storm grew worse. The temperature dropped lower. Fear settled into her heart. Not fear of poverty. Not fear of loneliness. Fear that she might not survive the night. Across town, Jacob Miller sat alone beside a crackling fire. At 62 years old, Jacob had spent most of his life working as a blacksmith. His hands were rough, his shoulders broad, and his face marked by years of hard labor. Many considered him quiet. Some considered him stubborn. Others considered him strange. After all, he lived alone. His wife, Eleanor, had passed away nearly a decade earlier. Since then, Jacob rarely attended social gatherings. He worked. He read books. He tended his small garden. And he kept mostly to himself. Yet beneath his reserved nature lived a heart few truly understood. As the storm intensified, Jacob stared into the flames. He remembered another winter long ago. A winter when he and Eleanor had struggled. A winter when a stranger's kindness had saved them from hunger. The memory never left him. A sudden movement outside his window caught his attention. He frowned. No one should have been walking through weather like this. Standing slowly, he approached the glass. What he saw made his heart tighten. A woman. Alone. Fighting against the wind. Barely able to stay on her feet. Jacob immediately grabbed his coat. Without hesitation, he stepped into the storm. Snow whipped against his face as he hurried toward the struggling figure. "Ma'am," he called. Sarah turned weakly. For a moment, neither recognized the other. Then Jacob remembered seeing her years earlier at church events beside Thomas. Sarah Whitmore? Her eyes widened. "Mr. Miller?" The wind nearly drowned out her voice. Jacob looked at her trembling hands, her exhausted expression, and the thin coat providing almost no protection from the cold. "You'll freeze out here." Sarah lowered her eyes. "I'll find somewhere." "No, you won't." She hesitated. In a town where gossip traveled faster than wildfire, spending the night in a widower's home would become tomorrow's favorite scandal. Both of them knew it. Sarah looked around nervously. People judged. People assumed. People invented stories. And once stories began, they rarely stopped. Jacob saw the hesitation immediately. Then he spoke the words that would change everything. "I've got room by the fire," he said firmly. Snow swirled around them. "And I don't care who talks." For a second, Sarah simply stared. Not because of the invitation, but because of the certainty behind it. There was no pity in his voice. No hidden motive. No hesitation. Only kindness. Tears filled her eyes. No one had spoken to her like that in months. No judgment. No suspicion. No conditions. Just kindness. A simple human being helping another human being. Sarah's defenses crumbled. And for the first time since losing Thomas, she allowed herself to believe she wasn't completely alone. Jacob led her through the storm toward his home. Inside, warmth wrapped around her instantly. The fire crackled. The smell of soup lingered in the air. A kettle whistled softly on the stove. To most people, it would have seemed ordinary. To Sarah, it felt like stepping into another world. A safe world. A world she thought she had lost forever. Jacob handed her a blanket. "Sit." Sarah obeyed. Her frozen hand stretched toward the flames. The heat stung at first. Then comfort slowly replaced pain. Jacob served her a bowl of hot soup. She tried to thank him. Instead, she began crying. Not quietly. Not politely. Months of grief poured out all at once. The tears she had hidden. The fears she had buried. The loneliness she had carried. Everything came rushing to the surface. Jacob said nothing. He simply sat nearby. Sometimes the greatest kindness isn't speaking. Sometimes it's staying. And on that winter night, while snow buried the town outside, a broken widow found warmth beside a fire, and a friendship that would soon challenge an entire community's idea of what kindness truly means. Neither Sarah nor Jacob could have imagined that by spring, their names would be on everyone's lips. Not because of scandal. Not because of shame. But because one act of courage would inspire a chain of events that transformed countless lives. And it all began with a simple sentence. "I've got room by the fire." A sentence spoken by a man who didn't care who talked. Because he cared far more about doing what was right. And sometimes, that's exactly what changes the world.